Hello, Engine Doc here. Welcome to my model shop. Today's subject is a model engine of a Perkins Windmill Engine. These engines would be used when the wind wasn't blowing to pump water for the cattle back in the day. And Debolt Machine puts out several different models of engines, and this particular example is the Perkins Windmill Engine. I was lucky enough to acquire this engine about a month or so ago, and it looks like it's been through maybe a couple of estates and a couple of different acquisitions possibly, but anyway, it has been neglected somewhat. I found it in a barn. A fella had it, his father had it and passed away. And you know, you always wonder what the history of these engines are when you find them, and where they've been and what they've seen. But anyway, this one was kind of rough, had good compression, all the parts are there, just needed some attention to be brought back to show quality again. So what I've done is I've inspected the engine thoroughly and disassembled it, cleaned it. I've sandblasted some of the parts. I'm going to repaint it, polish some parts, and put it back together. So I'm going to show you what's involved in something like that, and the inner workings of a Debolt Machine Perkins Windmill Engine, serial number 2038. The 2000 series engines were produced by Debolt as a mechanics kit, whereby the engine was all machine, the castings were machined, and all the parts were made, and they were given to you in baggies, and you were charged with the task of assembling an engine from just nuts, bolts, and parts. And if you were a good mechanic and knew how to fit parts and paint parts and get the thing running, you ended up with a good engine. So I built an Almond, one of their Almond models, back in the 90s. And it ran like a champ, and it was easy to assemble. I highly recommend Debolt Machine. Paul's a good guy to deal with. I don't have any affiliation with him other than knowing that dealing with him in the past and knowing that he will stand behind you if you have any problems. So anyway, we'll get on. I'll show you what this engine looks like disassembled. Okay, here's a picture. I think this is the picture that probably came with the engine when it was sold with the kit. This is what the engine looks like when it's all together. That's the fuel tank up there, and the dome is the muffler, and it's got a nifty little set of fly balls there for the governor, and it's just a beautiful little engine. And the ones I've seen run at the shows just run like champs, or as the old guys say, they run like a pickle cedar. So I've got this engine apart. I didn't take any before video. Didn't really think about it, but I've got the engine apart. Here's one of the flywheels. I've got it sandblasted. I'll back this off here a little bit. Oops. Here's one of the flywheels I've got sandblasted. Very good quality machine work on these things. I've got the other wheel over in the lathe. I'll show you that. Polishing the rim. And it's coming out pretty decent. I won't go for a mirror finish, but I do want to clean it up and leave the flywheel rims bare. A little more maintenance involved, but they look better, I think. I really admire an engine that's got polished flywheel rims, especially wheels that look this nice. Here's the base of the engine. I've got it sandblasted, bead blasted. I use glass beads, and I've got most of the paint off of it. There's some primer left. The fellow that assembled the engine did a nice job of painting it, used good primer, but just over the years the paint has gone away and just needs to be renewed, and that's what I like to do. So we're going to do that. Here's the skid that the original builder built for the engine. It's pretty nifty. It's a little big, and it's a little too narrow for me. I'm going to make one that's a little bit wider so that the engine can't be as easily tipped over sideways onto the wheels, and try to eliminate the possibility of bending a crankshaft or something like that if it would happen to fall over to the side. But anyway, this has removable boxes here, and I haven't cleaned anything up on this. This is the way I found it. He had some little trays in here for oil to drip in and so forth, and the wiring, he had the coil in there, and the other end comes apart too, and slides open. Great idea for storage. Here's the little coil that went in there. This is an igniter fired engine, so it takes a coil like this, and I'll show you the igniter a little bit later, but this came with it. Very nifty little coil. If anybody knows who made these, I don't know if Debolt had these available at the time with their engines or not, but if anybody know who made that coil, maybe it's just some individual did, let me know. Okay, moving along. Here's the fuel tank. It's brass tubing with machined steel ends that look like they were apparently soldered into place. And this tank is unusual in that this is the filler end, and there's a tube that comes from the bottom. You can see it in there possibly. There's a tube that actually comes up from that fitting, comes up here, circles over, and comes back down, and when you choke the engine, it starts a siphon down this tube to the carburetor. That eliminates the weight of the head pressure of the fuel level in the tank, and the only weight or head pressure of fuel that you have is what's in the very small line. I've laid out the line here so you can see it. This comes down, screws into the bottom of the tank, of course, and the fuel comes down here and comes into this chamber. And this fella that built this engine has put a shutoff valve here, and I think I'm going to put that back original. I understand that there was just a T here with a plug in the bottom of it, so you can drain the fuel if you want to, and get rid of it that way. But this particular setup here wasn't intended to go on this engine. But anyway, your fuel comes down here, comes into this bowl, and if you look inside, I don't know if the camera will show it or not, but there is a check ball in there. You can hear it shaking. And that check ball, gravity keeps it on its seat, and that keeps the fuel from flowing. And it's just the weight of the fuel in this tube, and when the engine takes an intake stroke, there's enough vacuum to lift that ball off the seat and give it just a little sip of fuel. Continuing on with the fuel system here, this is actually the choke plate, and this is the carburetor body, or the mixer body as they were called back in the day, assembly. It's held on with 3 screws, and you take these screws out and there's not much in there, just another extension of this housing here, and basically the half moon shape, or the right here is the air intake, and this little hole here is the fuel coming up from that check ball, and the choke plate, it sets on here, and you just rotate this choke plate around to close off the hole. Rotate the choke plate, I've got it on backwards, but it rotates around here and closes off the air, and that's what chokes the engine. There's the main block, short block I'll call it. It basically is in real good shape. I'm getting ready to squirt a little more new paint on it, freshen it up a little bit. Cylinder's in real good shape. Debolt does a great job machining these engines. This is where a little oiler cup goes. This is the drive gear for the timing, and this is where the oiler goes here in the side of the engine. Oils the cylinder, and this hole here is where the connecting rod is. See if I can roll it around here and you can see the rod and the crank. You can watch those rotate by when the engine's running. Pretty cool looking. Here's a view in the bottom end of the engine. Pretty good access to get to the rod cap there. There's little shims in there, and that rod cap was actually loose on its throw. The big end was loose. So I re-shimmed it. Here's the little shims that come out. Typical old engine mechanics here, you got to stop and shim the rod every once in a while and tighten her back up, keep her from knocking.